Because when you talk about, the transatlantic slavery, people think that the people that were taken to the Caribbean were mostly Ashantes. No, it was actually the Ashantes that were capturing people. So they were capturing people from the north of Ghana,
and other places,
the Salaga market.
Yeah.
So they catch you from the Salaga side. They walk you down all the way to Cape Coast, where you take your last bath.
Wait, you walk all the way from the north.
I tell you,
down. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
So that is why
you are making it up. It's not true.
I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up.
Yes, a lot of people don't know about Salaga slave market. And you say you don't know the history attached to the Salaga slave market. You may know the name, you may know the location, but you don't know the stories attached to it. A few years ago, when I go onto the internet and I see that African Americans are still talking about slavery at what present year it is, I'll be like, come on, why don't you guys just move forward? Why aren't you thinking about the present and the future? Why are you still talking about slavery? But these past days, I'm realize they say, yeah, cry no. It seems say we've not sat down to discuss the slavery that happened on our motherland. Because of that, into the tries be brena chim say Asante for nenye, and Asante for na say, and Asante for the kofa and kwa ha say, every ton ye, and Asante for say. And today I'm here to debunk one of those claims, and that is Asantes went to the Salaga market to buy, to trade, or to bring slaves from there to the coastal areas.
Abusia nanu ya aneye Wode Maya Mr. Ghana baby abusia for okofa baye ono ani jejireje Wode Maya edi betu dwa se eye asantefo anabusia slave trade no omo ye den omo kose sa northern for eton omo ma emrofo no eniye o kasa wutumu se na nia bria asem na o ka no o gidie o mu se de o ka no kure trodo ana o ye den o ka o se asantefo etumi mache northerners no from northern region e de omo ko piem e wo central e mo omo ko take omo last bath and some o ma ye den ye de omo akokase ho no mabusua Wode Maya echiremu a senior amanfo hu ni se asantefo mom ana ye ton wo mo no enye sa na tie kura na mom no asantefo ana busua omo ton nkofo eye den ema emrofo no sa nsem yi atese Wode Maya ebeka ye no ama enibre aba ankasa asantefo ni abra me se omo chiremu se Wode Maya say wonim history say wonim nothing about history and some na wokan no wanya research bia anode ye den odi ka sansem no ase ensem na no wokan no na agenda bi ye den eta to opese amanfo nya otan eye den ema asantefo because odi sansem no ba out no amanfo so kan sem amanfo e kan sem omo say slave trade no abusia e hyase e wo mra kyese emrofo no bedru Ghana hanom no omo a omo di kan no omo trade ye eye omo ati coastal honom coastal for no eyemfantefo guns ga adangwefo ewefo omo ati coastal areas no omo na emrofo no ye den enu omo di dwa nkasa nti edwadie no mu no anabusuafo sa emfantefo ya sa ma emrofo ya sa asimo omo si castle abusua ewo coastal areas hono castle hono so na abusuafo ni ye hold slaves si ansana ye do ma ko fashion pa ye den akoba bi o se ye do omo ko ni nyina ekoso no so na abusuafo emfantefo eni tua omo etumi anya ho hwe asantefo mom anani mrofo ye den ekon ye enti esi den ana woda na ho beka se asantefo enani mrofo ni trade ye atese omo ton bibifo eye den ema omo me say enibre aba na Abena Nyankonton e kire Wode Maya se ninsem na okan ye no nukura bia enim abusua momyanko ne yankotie na Abena Nyankonton.
Because when you talk about, the transatlantic slavery, people think that the people that were taken to the Caribbean were mostly Ashantes. No, it was actually the Ashantes that were capturing people. So they were capturing people from the north of Ghana,
and other places,
the Salaga market.
Yeah.
So they catch you from the Salaga side. They walk you down all the way to Cape Coast, where you take your last bath.
Wait, you walk all the way from the north.
I tell you,
Are you kidding me?
so that is why
You are making it up. It's not true.
I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up.
Yes, a lot of people don't know about Salaga slave market. And you say you don't know the history attached to the Salaga slave market. You may know the name, you may know the location, but you don't know the stories attached to it. A few years ago, when I go onto the internet and I see that African Americans are still talking about slavery at what present year it is, I'll be like, come on, why don't you guys just move forward? Why aren't you thinking about the present and the future? Why are you still talking about slavery? But these past days, I'm realize they say, yeah, cry no. It seems say we've not sat down to discuss the slavery that happened on our motherland. Because of that, in into the tries be brena chim say Asante for nenye, and Asante for na say, and Asante for the cofa and kwa ha say, every ton ye, and Asante for say. And today I'm here to debunk one of those claims, and that is Asantes went to the Salaga market to buy, to trade, or to bring slaves from there to the coastal areas. That is not true, and I have concrete proof. You see, after this information being shared, I think say anybody, whether you're a northerner or a southerner or a westerner, western region, I don't know whether that is what they call them, but anybody who has spread misinformation or anybody who has actually believed that Ashantis had a part to play in the Salaga market OS Ashantis, a huge apology. And we will take it. You have to come online and apologize to us. Meanwhile, no Ashanti. No. The only account name Ebaye is a pastor who is giving his account. He's a preacher. The next Ashanti princess wasn't named. She was taken after the Akatamanson War. She was a reward to one of those guys. Into Mr. Asante Bia, no Asante has a hand to play in or had a part to play in the Salaga slave market. It is the chiefs and the white people. Okay. I myself didn't think I'll one day sit on the internet and talk about slavery. No, because our history does not start with slavery or colonization. But here we are today, and it is because of comments like this. That is why I'm doing this video. See, before me talking about Ashanti history extensively, I used to go on live, and some of the guys that came on my live stream for any discussion that we are making, some of them from their accent and intonation, you could tell, say, no money Asante for. But it was never necessary for me to ask where they are from, because that's not important to me. But one of the things I na say bia see discussion Ghana history bemness Asante bema. And one of the things I na omo etai kan ebitai kan. One of the things ebitai kan is say Asante for bu other tribes o me enkoa. Asante for I say. Ninya claims I na other bloggers, because women they share blogging and saying, they gave us some misinformation and other times not a complete story. Into a man go for baby, into a man to talk to go for baby na chim. Be partial AB and I yache. Inyes ka into Kwanko, Jamaica, Suriname, and other places and go for information, bro. But ye bear ya family. Apart from that, you guys should contact me for all your photography needs, Mr. Ramon. Mama Medjumanya, when I mean you've been to internet and to light. Let me say, Mamon Como. Now let's dive in. I chose two sources. One is the Cambridge University and the other is BBC. I chose those sources because I read through, is it Yen Ghana and Ghana.com? They just copied the intro of what is on Cambridge University, then added some programs to it that doesn't really tell us much about the Salaga market. So I chose BBC and Cambridge. Now, I have never asked anyone to like or share my video, but this video, I need you all to like and share it to others. Let it reach others. Let them know that Ashantis had nothing to do with Salaga slave market or the slave trade at Salaga. Now, let's go to part 2. Okay, so the next account is from bbc.co.uk, the Atlantic slave trade. Before the 16th century, slavery was not regarded by anyone (outside or inside Africa) as a particularly African institution. The association between Africa and slavery emerged in the 15th century. It was then that ships' design made it possible for sailors from the Mediterranean to make long journeys down the coast of Africa and ultimately across the Atlantic to the Americas. By the time slaves reached the coast, they had already undertaken a long journey from inland. They were often brought and sold several times along the way. Many of these transactions were conducted in marketplaces. Case study, the Salaga slave market. Salaga in northern Ghana was the site of a major slave market. Today, there are still descendants of the people who were slaves. The history is vivid in people's mind. Amkan Bayo Bayu. My God, means bathing. Bayou means slave. So literally, it means bathing slave. This is the place where all slaves were bathed. They would bathe them here, rub them with shea butter and make them shine. And they gave them food to eat to make them look big. Then they take them to the slave market for sale. The paramount chief of Salaga. Salaga is in the southern part of the northern region. Salaga was an old slave market. Caravans used to come all the way from northern Nigeria and other places, Burkina Faso, Mali, and so on. Salaga became important for its market in human beings. The slaves were brought here. There were places to store them, and most of the time, they were actually tied around trees in the market. There were just one or two rooms that can even be seen up to date, but most of the time they were tied around big trees. Big trees, guava trees close to the market. Slavery became a commercial venture. Even local chiefs benefited. When the slaves were brought, the chief took a certain number for themselves and sold them to buyers. People benefited. If you were not a victim of the cause, then you were benefited. Sometimes even the people themselves became victims because it was so inhumane that there was no sympathy between them. If you quarrel with your friend and you managed to capture him, you could take him to the slave market to sell him. With hindsight, we feel remorse that these things happened and our great-great-grandfathers took part in this trade. But at the time, it was a normal thing. It's just like what is happening today. It was a market. People were buying. There was no transaction in cash. It was just gunpowder or guns in exchange for human beings. Sometimes you look at it from a human and religious point of view. Sometimes you feel it was a very bad thing, but it happened. Slaves were the most important commodity as opposed to other commodities like salt and other mercantile goods that was brought from the south. But definitely slavery dominated the activities here. Everybody here in Salaga is a descendant of a slave. Everybody in Salaga except of those who have been moved in. But you see, people don't feel easy talking about it. But everybody knows that he is a descendant of a slave. The Goroma, the Hausa, the Zaboroma, the Hausa. Why is there Hausa too? Are there different types of Hausa? The Dagomba, all the tribes in Salaga. There are 13 tribes in Salaga. No. Recruiting slaves, the Portuguese were particularly keen to explore Africa for wealth and material gain. At a point in time, they had started up colonies in the Americas and needed labor to work on plantations there. In the 1440s, Africans were captured and taken to Portugal. 52 years old later, in 1992, the Italian adventurer Christopher Columbus made the first of his visit to the Caribbean, arriving somewhere near the Bahamas. His aim was to gain wealth for himself and his patrons, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain. In 1518, the first slaves were dispatched across the Atlantic. Soon, Britain, the Netherlands, and France were competing with Spain and Portugal for a share of profit of slavery. This new transatlantic slave trade was very different from the kind of slavery that had existed before. Scale of trade. The sheer number of slaves taken was unprecedented. The large scale of trading destabilized the social and economic order. By the end of the 18th century, one historian estimated that 70,000 people a year were captured and taken against their will to the Americas. What is now Angola was reduced in part to a wasteland. In total, at least 12 million Africans were forcefully removed from the continent. Okay, so since this guy spoke about the journey, I'd like to read about the journey and I'll be done because the rest isn't about Salaga anymore. Dangerous and long journey. The transatlantic slave trade involved an immensely long, terrible journey to the Americans, the Middle Passage to find more. No, that's not what I thought he was going to talk about. The Salaga journey. I mean, after reading all this, if you still think, say, Ashantis or Asantes had a part to play in the Salaga slave market, then, honey, it's your undying hatred for Ashantis because there is proof that our people were not involved. I mean, have you thought about it? Why would somebody sell slaves and later fight the white man from taking their people? It doesn't really make sense because no Ashanti man will want to sell his fellow Ashanti.
Wa obusia ene nana Abena Nyankonton ana busuafo mote ne nka no ne nsem a ode aguhui e die ana wo ka fa ho comment section honum ne kire wa adwen e fa ne nsem no ho hanom e skeleton man TV be see a top from one ye de bebre wonti so we your first time one ene obomodin subscribe me notification so keke all no send video bia ye de betum no won some sabe kan no anya bia hwe medasi bebre.